2014, while in Louisiana on official business for CVA, did you take your staff, including young female staff members, to a strip club?
Absolutely not. Anonymous smears.
So Pete Hegseth is currently being forced to defend himself against what he is saying are anonymous smears against a Democrat senator from Arizona who only wants to bring up negative and disgusting lies and smears against this very honorable, decent man as he becomes Secretary of Defense. This Senator Mark Kelly is a stain on our democracy. I gotta look for my speaker.
Accuse another member of the organization, not you, of sexual assault in a strip club.
We have multiple statements on the record referring to that.
But you claim you were not there when that occurred.
Absolutely not.
Now, the behavior I cite, if true, do you think that this behavior of intoxication
Connected.
going into these type of establishments,
They're calling him a drunk.
women on your staff being so uncomfortable that they have to file these sort of harassment claims, do you think this is appropriate behavior for a leader?
Senator, the overwhelming majority of anyone who's worked for me, including the on-the-record statements that have been submitted to this, with their name on it, on the record, men and women who worked with me every day, are the overwhelming preponderance of evidence that testify to my leadership and professionalism in leading Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. My leadership has been completely impugned on these veterans organizations that did fantastic work.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm not even going to go into the
and we managed our
accusations.
financial books with integrity across the board. How many people, everybody who runs a campaign.
I have limited time. I'm not going to get into the accusations that come from Fox News. I know you have some of your Fox News colleagues here. There were multiple instances
This
of
guy's
accusations
disgusting.
against you about drinking on the job.
All anonymous, all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and everything.
The challenge here for me, Mr. Hegseth, is when there is discussion about personal challenges and you admittedly had issues with heavy drinking. It's hard to kind of square the circle here. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. Let me ask you if I have about 90 seconds left here.
This is C-SPAN, by the way.
If you had to answer these questions about sexual assault against you and your drinking.
Oh, we can't take it anymore. Sexual assault and drinking.
If you were under oath.
Senator, all I'm pointing out is the false claims against
Oh,
me.
I hate these people so much.
You do not want to answer that question. I walked into this hearing this morning concerned that you haven't demonstrated adequate leadership in your civilian roles. And this is a dangerous world we're living in here. And America cannot afford a Secretary of Defense who is unprepared for that mission. I'm going to leave with concerns about your transparency. You say you've had personal issues in your past, yet when asked about those very issues, you blame an anonymous smear campaign, even when many of these claims are not anonymous. Which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both.
Trying to find the best way to show you
that
this.
you're not being honest with us or the American people because you know the truth would disqualify you from getting the job. And just as concerning as each of these specific disqualifying accusations are, what concerns me just as much is the idea of having a Secretary of Defense who is not transparent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my 2 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. I would, at this point, ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record letters by Tina Kingston, Louisiana State Director of Concerned Veterans for America, and Holly Talley, Louisiana Local Director of Concerned Veterans for America, attesting to the appropriateness of Mr. Hegseth's conduct with regard to female staffers. Without objection, that is added to the record. And And Senator Banks, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Hegseth. You've conducted yourself very well today. In fact, so well that I believe it's incumbent upon this committee to confirm you ASAP to get you on the job to clean up the mess
Amen.
that we have at the Pentagon ongoing at this moment because of the leadership there over the last 4 years has failed us. In President Biden's first year in office, the Department of Defense spent over 5 million man-hours on quote-unquote counter-extremism and diversity training, what you and I might call woke training or DEI. The administration has refused to provide us any more recent data than that first year, but we know that it's exponentially more man-hours wasted on DEI over the last 4 years. And I wonder, what do you make of that? What could those 5 million man-hours in that first year of Secretary Austin and President Biden's administration, what could those 5 million man-hours have been used for?
Senator, that's a lot of service members sitting in a lot of briefs, hearing about a lot of threats or political perspectives that might be dangerous, that do not comport to threats that actually exist inside the force, or ideas that introduce critical race theory or DEI or climate change initiatives that they and their commands have to conform to. And every time one of those happens, it gets pushed down the chain of command. That also includes new layers of leadership that have been created under this administration, committed to enforcing those types of DEI and CRT initiatives. So we hear 5 million man hours, and that sounds like a lot. The more troubling aspect is how many training hours that takes away from a company commander or battalion commander or a wing commander who's out there trying to maintain their force, which is already constrained because of what the Biden administration has done to the defense budget and defense capabilities. So they're having to choose between the political prerogatives of the civilians who are demanding more DEI and CRT and gender quotas and the readiness of their forces. And I believe this Pentagon is prepared because of our commander-in-chief for a Secretary of Defense, should I be confirmed, that laser focuses on these issues, and they're ready to respond. They want to pack their rucksacks and go train because they understand we live in a dangerous world.
I think that's an important point, a key point, because months later, while the priority of the Biden-Austin-led Pentagon was on DEI and woke training, one of the biggest embarrassments in American history happened when we lost 13 of our heroes in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Secretary Austin testified before the House Armed Services Committee a couple of years ago, and responding to a question from me said he had, quote, no regrets about what happened in Afghanistan. I wonder, what do you make of that?
Senator, it's shameful.
Shameful.
They still tout it as the most successful airlift in American history,
It's crazy.
when what the rest of us all saw was true laid before our eyes. Utter failure, a destruction of a military legacy there, abandonment of our allies, death of American troops, detriment to our reputation, and then no answers and no accountability on the other side. And then what was unleashed because of what happened in Afghanistan? The October 7th attacks, an invasion into Ukraine. The world recognized weakness for what it was. And who bore the brunt for it? The troops on the front lines at Abbey Gate doing an impossible job, whose external security was the Taliban, because there was no actual plan for this under the Biden administration. And yet, not a single person, the only person held accountable in those moments was a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel who had the courage to stand up and say someone should be held accountable for that. His name is Stu Scheller. No one else involved has ever taken accountability for it. And when that microcosm becomes the reality of the perception of the American military or America's commitment to victory and success and positive outcomes, the world responds to that. President Trump is going to restore real deterrence by bringing a real warrior culture back, rebuilding our military, and ending wars properly. And if we have to fight them, winning them decisively.
I served in Afghanistan, you served in Afghanistan. 75% of our nation's veterans disagree with how the withdrawal from Afghanistan was handled. The embarrassment of it, what that's done, I believe, has directly impacted our historic recruitment crisis in this country, without a doubt. And you've already talked about that, but How do we fix it? How do we bring pride back to wearing the uniform for the next generation, to inspire them to do what you and I did, to raise our right hand and take that oath and serve this great country?
I really do think it comes back to strong, clear leadership, patriotic, pro-American leadership that says we're not going to focus on all the other political prerogatives. That's why we all have political perspectives. I said this before and I'll say it again. In uniform, none of that
Hey,
matters.
Janet.
You wear green, you wear blue, you bleed red. That's it. Who you vote for doesn't matter. But when the perception of that changes, then you don't want people deciding whether to serve based on a political party in power. That's a dangerous thing for continuity inside your military. And it's fragile right now. President Trump, and if I'm confirmed with my leadership, we're going to restore the continuity of an apolitical military that acts decisively and only based on merit. They sound basic, but they're fundamental.
You and I agree that wokeness is weakness. Mr. Hegseth, do you support racial quotas in recruitment or promotions in the United States military?
No way.
Senator, I do not support any form of racial quota.
Do you support affirmative action in our nation's military academies?
Senator, I only support hiring and promoting and admitting the best and brightest, whatever their background is.
I think that's very important. Mr. Hegseth, Lloyd Austin, the secretary, later went AWOL. He disappeared for days and never told the president, didn't even inform the president's chief of staff that he was going into the hospital. Would that ever occur on your watch?
No, Senator. I know in any one of my jobs, if I had decided to go AWOL for even a day or two in uniform or around that, that would have been a concern.
I believe accountability matters. No one to this day has ever, as you've said, been held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan. It was embarrassing to this country. It's impacted this country greatly. And I applaud you and President Trump for bringing accountability back to our Pentagon. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes the distinguished ranking member for a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit an article discussing some of the issues of readiness and DEI. There has been a comment that 5.9 million man hours have been used for DEI.
Reed is a particularly disgusting
An
individual.
estimate out of more than 2 billion man hours that the Department of Defense invested during the time period.
Where is this published, sir?
This is published by Megan Myers, and I will get the
Okay. Then
military.com, I'm sorry.
without objection, it will be admitted to the
Thank you,
record.
Mr.
And Senator Slotkin, welcome to the committee.
Thank
and you
you.
are recognized.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for referencing the great Carl Levin as you introduced me. We miss him in Michigan. For those who I haven't met in my 1 week that I've been sworn into the Senate,
Oh, I was thinking of Harry
I'm a
Reid.
CIA officer recruited after 9/11. I did 3 tours armed in Iraq alongside the military. And have worked for 4 different secretaries of defense, both Democrat and Republican, proudly, and watched them make decisions that literally determine the life and death of Americans in the dark of night. I'm also a Democrat representing a state that Trump won, right? We both won on the same ballot. So I understand that President Trump has the right to nominate his people. We are going to have policies that we disagree with. All of that, to me, comes very standard. What I think I'm most concerned with is that no president has the right to use the uniformed military in a way that violates the U.S. Constitution and further taints the military as that apolitical institution that we all want, right? And our founders designed the system so that, we had posse comitatus, that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. We went through our own experience with that with the British. As the Secretary of Defense, you will be the one man standing in the breach should President Trump give an illegal order, right? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, you are going to be the guy that he calls to implement this order. Do you agree
What are you
that
afraid
there
of,
are some
Slotkin?
orders that can be given by the commander-in-chief
Exactly,
that would
Lou.
violate the
Hi,
U.S.
Catherine.
Constitution?
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal
Thank you.
No, I'm not saying you will,
Exactly.
but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden
Slotkin's
or any other
afraid of
president,
something.
Donald Trump could give? Is there anything that a commander-in-chief could ask you to do with the uniformed military that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, anybody of any party
Right.
could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President
I
Trump will
understand.
be
You've
giving
done your
any
genuflecting
illegal
to him.
orders.
You're genuflecting.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was
Disgusting.
asked and did use uniformed military to clear unarmed protesters. He was given the order to potentially shoot at them. Helos flew low
Yes, she
in
is, Wayne.
Washington, D.C. as crowd control. He later apologized publicly for those actions. Was he right or wrong to apologize?
Senator, I was there on the ground.
And
I saw
I understand, and I respect that.
I've been there.
But
I
you're about
understand
to
the
be
level
the
of threat
Secretary of
that was
Defense.
involved in that moment. I
Was
also
he right
understand
to, so he was he,
legality and the
sir,
Constitution.
was he
and
right
the
or
laws of what
wrong
you
to
have.
apologize?
I'm not going to put words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or
No,
anybody else. from
he
this
said them
podium.
himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he
Oh,
do the
what
right
are you
thing
scared
by
of,
apologizing?
Slotkin?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say
I'm
yes or no.
interested
You
in
can say
upholding
no.
the laws and the Constitution.
Okay,
in any
so
particular
Wow,
Donald
she's
Trump
gross.
asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the active duty military against the quote enemy within. Have
That would be
been
you,
personally involved
Slotkin.
in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Yeah,
Senator,
against people like
I'm glad we
you.
finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right, I'm
If
just
confirmed, I would be party to any number of
So you
conversations.
haven't been in any of these
which I would
conversations?
not reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States.
Just
or
have
not.
you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people. The active duty that I know you care about, I believe you care about. So have you been in conversations about using the active duty in any way? Whether it's setting up in detention camps, policing dangerous cities, have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has
Catherine.
not, which is secure the southern
for you,
border
Wayne.
and not allow floods of
Too bad they
illegal
cheat
people
in
the
Michigan.
country
So-
through an invasion
Okay.
that threatens the American people.
Okay,
And
okay,
there
I
are
got
ways
it.
in which the military is already playing a role in that, to include 5,000
Do
National
you
Guardsmen from
believe
Indiana and
that the
Texas.
US
We're at the border right now, allowing for border
Will
security.
you
So there is
ask the
plenty of
active
precedent
duty
for
military to
members
staff
enforcing
detention
our southern
centers?
border.
No, our U.S. military is not trained in law enforcement roles. I think you know that, right? We've seen how that mission is difficult for them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan because that's not the training a uniformed military comes with. Do you support the use of active duty military in supporting detention camps?
Senator, everything we will do would be lawful and under the
Okay,
Constitution, but
I'm
I
gonna take that as a
recognize
yes.
that this administration has abdicated its responsibility. President Trump is going to
Okay,
restore
in the
order at
spirit
the border,
of preserving
prevent our
the
enemies from
institution,
invading, and yes, he has said
Sir,
mass
I get your
deportations will
filibustering.
be
I get it.
a part of what
In the
happens.
spirit of preserving the institution that I think we both care about, legitimately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I've heard a couple of different things. One, you said you will not change the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what governs justice system in the military. Yes or no? You said that earlier.
Those are
I'm just
laws,
confirming.
Senator, set by Congress.
Okay, so you will not go to change it. You will not attempt to change it. You also said that JAG officers are potentially people who put their own interests in their own medals and promotions ahead of the troops. Senator Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer for most of his
You're
life.
a JAG
Is that
off,
what
is what you are,
believe about those who
Slotkin. A
implement
JAG
the
off.
justice system in the U.S. military?
That comes from a Pittsburgh
Senator,
girl.
I was speaking about particular JAG officers I've had to deal with in my military
Are you
experience,
gonna get
not about a
involved?
member of the United States.
Are you, as Secretary of Defense, going to get involved in the implementation of the U.S. Military Code of Justice?
Senator, ultimately, it will be a big part of my job to evaluate decisions vis-a-vis
Okay, so I'll
the
take
Uniform
that.
Code of
I'll
Military
take that as
Justice.
yes. Have you seen the,
But fairly.
is CQ Brown on your list in the Warrior Boards to be removed from his position?
Senator, every single senior officer will be reviewed based on meritocracy, standards, lethality, and commitment to lawful orders they will be given.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. I now recognize Senator Shaheen for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a request from a former general who served 35 years, Dennis Leitch, who most recently was commander of the 94th Regional Readiness Command
You're
at
right,
Fort Devens,
James.
Mass., who has asked that his letter
He the bulldog.
opposing Mr. Hegseth's nomination be entered into the record.
Is there objection? Without objection, it will be entered. Also, I present a host of letters and op-eds from former co-workers at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Vets for America, as well as Fox News Channel. I also have letters and op-eds from many veterans and Iraqis and Afghanis who were helped by Mr. Hegseth. I ask unanimous consent to introduce these letters and op-eds. Without objection, is so ordered. Senator Sheehy, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Entering a support letter in for
Wonder
Mr.
how old that
Hegseth,
dude was.
submitted by nearly 90 former soldiers who served with Pete in combat. I would like to submit a statement from 86 of them who support his nomination, although they come from
Wow,
different units
Wayne.
and ranks. The signatories commend Mr. Hegseth for his selfless
Amen,
leadership,
James. You
love
can
of his
get an
soldiers,
amen.
and commitment to our country.
2 items.
Sorry, one item. I ask unanimous consent to enter this. into the record.
Without objection, it will be entered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a Sheehy, so I'm on board.
Messed up that they ask these questions.
What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4 A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
I love these questions.
My
What do you think
brother's
are What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
in the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the militaries are on the way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they have no other choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they sat on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home.
He's got a
And
great
that's the one
point.
thing that I care about is you remember when I shut the door when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together and asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the warfighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your number one priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too, I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building, and you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this, but it is one of the most important jobs in the world. We got to make sure you're ready for it. I thank you for your answers. I got one final question that's very important to me. This is more of a technical question, but I think it's To fix the Army in this country is a 1 or 2 year problem. We can make bullets, we can make rifles. Fix the Air Force might be a 5-year problem. Fix our Navy is a decades-long pursuit. How are you going to fix our national? You don't have all the power. We're not China. Unfortunately, you can't snap your fingers. But how are you going to lead an initiative within the DoD to reinvigorate our national shipbuilding industry so we are able to compete with China? Because freedom of navigation is critical to our economy and the global economy. It's going to be a very important task for you to complete.
It's a critical question, Senator, and that's why I'm grateful that President Trump has said definitively to me and publicly that shipbuilding will be one of his absolute top priorities of this administration. So a lot of it does go into pulling things up into the OSD's office, Secretary of Defense's office, to shine a spotlight on it, to make sure the bureaucracy doesn't strangle important initiatives that need to happen. We need to
You're right, Lou.
reinvigorate our defense industrial base in this country to include our shipbuilding capacity. Some of it is on the east, some of it's on the west, some of it's on the Great Lakes. The workforce problems that our shipyards are facing are significant, and there's been a big investment from this committee, I know, in a lot of those places because of the shortfalls, manpower issues, everything else. We also see adversaries that have been able to innovate themselves in ways that their shipbuilding capacity is, I won't reveal it at this hearing, multitudes and multitudes beyond our capabilities. So it needs to be a rapid investment, a rapid fielding, and then we need to incentivize outside entities to fill the gap. We talk a lot about UAVs. UAVs are very important, but there's also a future of UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles, that will be a part of amplifying the impact of our Navy, because this administration has allowed our number of ships to drop below 300. It sets a projection of 340 or 350, but doesn't create the capacity to actually address it. And so if we're going to defend our interests, our allies, and put America first, we're going to have to be able to project power. That it means shipbuilding. It means historic investments in our defense industrial base there. And then also driving innovation and cost savings in ways that only business leaders inside the Pentagon can do.
When I'd add, I don't think any board in the world would have hired Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg when they founded their companies either. So this country was founded by young people who had a great vision. Thank you for being willing to serve your country again. And thanks for coming here today. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheehy. You yield back the balance of your time. Mr. Ranking Member, can we agree that you and I will notify members of a specific time until which the record will remain open for submission of questions for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
That will be a day or two. This concludes today's hearing. I want to thank the witnesses and their families, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Wow. Interesting. Alrighty then. So we didn't get to, let me turn this off. So we didn't get to see so much of the hearing. I've been kind of keeping my eye on it, been super disgusted by the Democrats' questioning of this honorable, amazing man who wants to take on a job that, oh my gosh, super important, super tough, and he knows he can do it. So, I mean, Secretary of Defense, we want someone like Pete Hegseth to lead us into the next 4 years, which will hopefully be a lot better than the last 4 years. Anyway, I know I'm looking rough today. I have been the past, especially past 48 hours, battling horrible diarrhea with my little dog. And I'm happy to say she's starting to feel better. I'm starting to see a change in her. I finally got some sleep last night, and so did she. So I'm just here trying to keep this little dog alive. That's what I do. All right. I think you're right, Lou. I think Pete is going to get the job. Cooler heads will prevail. I think the whole country is waking up to the fact that half of the country is stark raving mad, and we can't listen to those people anymore. They don't have our best interests at heart. Hi, Mikey. There people are leading our country. Like, you look at the leadership in California, it tells you everything. And you have to realize too that well, thank you, Larry. It's also quite obvious to see that all those people in California, it's Democrat run. They all agree with each other, and they are destroying their own beautiful state, one fire at a time, which are being set by arsonists. Apparently, sleeper cells have been activated. This is what I hear. I don't know for sure, but sleeper cells have been activated, and the arsonists are not from this country. And we learned that with, and this is the story that really blows my mind. They actually caught a dude with a flamethrower. The local people tied him down with zip ties and stopped him from starting a fire, which he said he was compelled to do, was compelled to start fires. They called the police. The police took him, and then they released him, claiming they did not have enough evidence, and he's an illegal alien. They still let him go. What does that tell you? It's pretty nasty stuff we're dealing with out there. So if you live in California, and I have a child in California in LA, so I'm not over here preaching blah blah blah. I mean, I literally have my heart on the line, and I am terrified for my child, and I wish he would leave, and I can't do anything about that. He's an adult, he'll make his own decisions. However, just gotta say, I have a lot of friends in California. I have a lot of followers in California too, and I love you guys. And I'm so sorry that your state has been taken over by the crazy DEI, which actually stands for DIE. It's horrible. All right, well, I'm going to say ciao for now, and I'll be back on soon, hopefully with really good news about Muffin. So I think she's calling me now. I'm gonna go take care of her. All right, you guys. Yep, you're right, Wayne. All right, you guys, ciao for now.